Hi everyone and welcome to another video, and today we're going to be covering my top learnings and observations throughout the year of 2023 inside the Mid Lane Academy. So just to give a bit of context, we've done about actually just over 2,000 reviews this year inside the program, which is remarkable. We've been able to get many amazing results for those people inside the Mid Lane Academy, which has been, to be honest, quite shocking. I think still to this day, even after doing the Mid Lane Academy for years now, seeing these amazing results, it really makes it all worth it. So thank you for those of you who've joined and followed the process, followed the advice, and got the results. So thank you so much for trusting in me and trusting in the program. So let's go ahead. This is going to be a bit of a scrappy, raw, unedited video, really just kind of covering free flow, what my main learnings were, or I guess observations throughout the year of 2023 were. So let's kick it off. Now, I think one of the major things that I observed is that because there were significant changes to the LP gains, this has actually kind of had a bit of an interesting effect on the psychology of players, right? So let's use an example, right? Let's take an average Diamond 4 client and draw a line here in a bit of a bell curve, right? So, I would say before, on the previous system where the LP gains were plus minus 15 to 20, quite low, and now they're upwards of 25 to 30, right? Now I would say, let's start with before. Before, I would say it was quite normal for a player, let's take the average player to fluctuate between, let's say, Emerald 1 and let's say D3. And this would be a pretty average client, right? And this is assuming that they're not super, they're relatively consistent. They don't have crazy stage 4 issues. They have a pretty good relationship with the game and they have a pretty solid process. Nowadays, right, because of the LP changes and how you can, go minus 30 very regularly, this kind of elongates the bell curve, if you will. So even if you have a great process, and even if you have a decent relationship with the game and you're not tilt queuing or anything, you can theoretically fluctuate maybe all the way from Emerald 2 to that of D2. So it's actually pushed kind of the outliers on either side of kind of what our skill range or LP range is going to be. Now, this is very important for managing expectations because a lot of people, back in the day would have lost their mind. If they went from D4 to Emerald 2 or bottom of Emerald 2, they'll think, oh my God, the world's over. I'm screwed. I've lost all this LP. It's going to take me ages to get back. But the reality is that now, with the LP changes, that's not big of a deal. Think about it. If you go 3-0 in a block, you can go from D4 0 LP to D4 90 LP. Boom, just like that. Just one 3-0 block. You've literally basically gone from the bottom of D4 to the top of D4. You're fringing on D3. That's just one 3-0 block. So it's reasonable to assume that player could easily fluctuate between, again, Emerald 2 all the way to Diamond 2. And so the reason this is important is that it manages our expectations. When we do inevitably get a few rough blocks, or maybe we get outplayed or things don't go our way and we drop from D4 to Emerald 2, we shouldn't be losing our mind. That's part of the journey. That's part of the process. And so I think before, we need to, I guess, change our reaction to this amount of, or at least manage our expectations, which will allow us to not over-exaggerate the shift in LP. And this is why the way I view it is that understanding this range of LP is kind of like a toolkit within itself for developing a better relationship with the game. I actually go a lot deeper on this within episode of 178 of the Broken by Concept. I'll link that in the description below if you're interested on this topic and want to learn more about it. So moving on to the second point, let's draw another kind of bell curve here. And so when people are thinking about kind of improving or climbing in League, I guess there's two ways to really view it. We can improve our skill ceiling, right? So let's say we've got this D4 client who ranges between D2 to Emerald 2. We can raise our skill ceiling and push the outliers, or kind of what we understand at a high level, and improve our strengths, if you will. And really, let's say, push this up from a D2 skill cap to maybe that of a low master. But if we do that and we neglect our skill floor, we're still going to be having that massive fluctuation in rank because we're going to be lacking in consistency. And this is where fundamentals come into play. But what people don't understand about fundamentals, why a lot of people don't even like talking about fundamentals, especially at the higher elo brackets, is that they feel as though, fundamentals are overrated. People feel like, I can get away with having sloppy fundamentals. I don't need to have super sophisticated resets. my warding can be a little bit sloppy, my leaning and positioning can be a bit sloppy, etc., because you can theoretically compensate for this with being really, really good in other areas. Like, for example, if your skirmishing is really, really good and your champ mastery is super high and your team fighting is great and you know how to play off your key spikes really well and you've got all these other great strengths, you can still climb Master Plus without having amazing fundamentals. That's very possible. But it's not a very efficient or effective way to climb, especially for the average player. And this is where you'll really get capped, and this is where you actually can bring about a really toxic relationship with the game, because again, you'll still see that massive fluctuation in rank because you're being kept down by that low skill floor, if you will. And you know, what I've noticed is that people want to learn new things all the time. They're always thinking, oh, Curtis, what's next? What's the next new learning objective? What's the next new fancy thing you can teach me? What is it? What's this new thing that I need to learn? Like, we automatically assume that because we're at our rank, say again, I'm stuck at D4, we automatically need to learn new things to climb to a new rank. But this is a massive misconception. More often than not, and this is surprising to a lot of people, it's the execution and consistency of the basics that actually leads to more LP for the most part, right? If you're the average, again, Diamond 4 client with Champion Mastery, so let's say you have a beautiful champ pool of 3, you know, you really know for the most part, you know your matchups, and you're just an average Diamond 4 player. Sure, you know, we're gonna work on make sure that you're tightening up your lull states. We're gonna make sure that you're aware of, you know, your reference points with your champions, and you're really having a think about win conditions and your role in the composition and all that good stuff. More often than not, though, yes, we'll work on this stuff, but a Diamond 4 client will get immediate results from actually increasing the consistency of their first 8 minutes and the consistency of their early games, because, you know, sure, we can learn all this stuff, and this is the stuff we will learn and we will refine throughout our journey, but we still need to focus on that, bringing up that skill floor. And just a lot of people don't do this because it's boring. It's boring. We think that if we ward and lean successfully for 1 game or 2 games or 3 games, that we've got it down pat, we've nailed it, we don't need to work on it anymore. It almost feels like we're blindsided, or we're delusional about how good we are or how consistent we are with the basics. But then when they bring in a VOD and I'm like, well, here, you just lucked out. You're overextended completely. If we play out this situation 10 games, you're going to die 8 times out of 10. We shouldn't even be in an advantageous position, because if we play this situation out many times, you're just going to be dead. You're not even going to be in this position. It's not replicable. And so I think that we need to retrain our brains to think about climbing in League from a perspective of consistency. The League system rewards consistency. And it's hard for a lot of people. It's a tough pill to swallow because, again, it's boring. It's not sexy. And yeah, I don't know what to tell you guys. I mean, it's just what gets results. I don't want to bullshit you. It's just what gets results. So, and again, I'm not saying that this other stuff is not important, but we need to bring up that skill floor. So moving on, this ties into an additional observation that people misunderstand how the rank system actually works, okay? So this is another reason why I think a lot of people actually don't understand the raising of the skill floor. So again, let's say I'm an Emerald 2 player, okay? And let's say I've been working on my early game and I've been working on my matchups and I'm working on my laning. So I've set these learning objectives. Boom, I've ticked it. I've worked on it. I've built some muscle memory. I'm happy. Great. Congratulations. And I start to maybe climb a little bit, right? I start to climb a little bit. And then what happens is maybe I go from Emerald 2, maybe I go to then Emerald 1, and maybe I I climb a little bit to D4. Then what happens, or maybe you only climb a little bit. What happens is that the way the rank system works is that we're not versing Emerald 2 players anymore. Every time you win or you're successfully employing these things and you're winning, you're not versing the same opponents. So now we're versing Emerald 1 players and Diamond 4 players. So what was once easy to execute potentially at an Emerald 2 level is not going to be easy to execute anymore. So now we're thinking, but Curtis, I just worked on this. You set me these learning objectives. I worked on my early game, or I worked on my trading, or I worked on whatever the hell it was. I did it. I got results. But why does it feel I'm not getting better at the game? Why does it feel like I'm still making the same mistakes? Because what they're assuming is that they're assuming just because they were able to execute upon these specific learning objectives at an Emerald 2 level, that they're automatically going to be able to execute upon them at a D4 level, which is absolute nonsense, because when you're versing better quality players, what happens is that your mental stack gets overwhelmed and gets more overloaded because the players you're versing are better. You're going to be in differing types of scenarios. The game pace is going to get picked up. Everything changes. For example, like, again, let's use a real life analogy. If I were to play, let's say I play basketball, and I can, dunk on kids when I'm playing versus 10-year-olds, but then I'm now versing, now I'm in there playing with 21-year-olds, and I'm trying to figure out, why can't I just continue to dunk on everyone? It's because the people around me are taller and better and stronger. They've got better defense. I can't just because I learned how to dunk against 10-year-olds doesn't automatically permit me to be able to do the exact same thing against different opponents. So this is why, again, the rank system it's like, Riot does a very, very good job of putting you in this Goldilocks zone, where in the middle, you're not versing, you're constantly versing players that are at your skill level, right? You're perfectly at this point. That's why at every point in your journey, right? It doesn't matter if you're in P4 or Emerald 4 or D4 or whatever, you're always going to feel overwhelmed, anxious, or I guess, you're going to feel like, I guess, really pushed. You're always going to feel uncomfortable on your journey. And this is why, because you're always versing better and better and better and better opponents. And this is, again, where I think that inherent disrespect of raising the consistency of the basics is, because we feel like just because we've done it once, we don't need to do it again. And yeah, so that's just, I guess, one of the observations I've noticed with people. So moving on, one of the other interesting observations that I made was that, this year I actually started the mid lane school, which is the below platinum version of the MLA. So now I've started coaching below platinum 4. So, gold, silver, bronze, etc. And what I noticed is that coaching below platinum 4 was the hardest thing I've ever done. And specifically, coaching below platinum is harder than coaching above master, which for a lot of people would be like, holy moly, that's weird. I don't agree with that, or that's silly. Okay, I want to kind of share my take on this. I'm not here to say that coaching master and above is easy, but the reason I believe it is easier than coaching the really low elo brackets is because there's less reasons as to why a problem is being caused, okay? So for example, if someone reaches master tier, you already know they're at a pretty high level of play. Like, they have a lot of muscle memory, and so when a mistake occurs, there's actually less reasons as to why that mistake actually occurs. There's actually less reasons because they already understand so much about the game. It's only probably going to be one of two things or one of three things. And typically the difficulty in Master Plus comes from understanding what the correct choice is from a win con perspective or from a macro perspective. But if you've played the game for a long time and you've played at a high level for a long time, you kind of just get it. And like, I never really found it overly complicated. And I've gotten many people to Grandmaster and Challenger inside the Midland Academy. But what I've noticed with below Platinum is that the range of possible reasons as to why they're making a given mistake is actually more, not less. For example, let's say, I'm coaching a random silver 3 player and they take a really bad trade, a poor trade. There can be so many reasons as to why they took that poor trade, or a combination of reasons. For example, they might not have even known what that ability did. Maybe they don't even know what that ability does. Number 2, they weren't anticipating that the enemy was going to use it. Right? There was no sign, there was no feeling they had that the enemy was going to use it. Maybe that's because they don't understand trading with last hits, or they don't understand how that champion's kit fundamentally works, or what the identity or what that champion is actually fundamentally trying to do. For example, it's like if, maybe they're versing a Zoe and the Zoe obviously wants to trade heavy at level 2, level 3, but they might not know that. Like, that's very champion specific knowledge that they might not know. They just might not have the character control or the mouse control to actually even respond to that. They might not even care to dodge that ability because they just felt like the ability wouldn't do enough damage, or they thought they would win the trade anyway. They might not even have known they had no mana, or their abilities were on cooldown because they didn't have the foresight or the awareness to do so. They might not even have known that their abilities are shorter cooldown or longer cooldown than theirs. There is so many things that could be going wrong with a trade. But if, again, we can transpose this or compare this with a Master Plus situation, I know that Master Plus player would have all this. I would already know that they have all this information. It's very easy for me to be like, oh, yeah, that's the reason that trade went poorly. That's where you weren't directing your attention. That's how we fix it. Boom, 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 boom. But when I'm working with these lower elo clients, it's like I need to be very, very careful about the questions that I ask and really to be very specific as to what actually is causing them to be making a particular mistake. And for a lot of us that have played the game for a long time, I played the game for like goddamn 13 years, it's been very difficult for me to actually resonate or even understand what the problems could possibly be. So this whole year for me has been a massive challenge. It has been a very humbling experience, and I've learned a shit ton. And look, to be fair, we have got pretty amazing results inside the mid-lane school, but still, nonetheless, it's been a challenge. And I feel like I've become a much better coach as a result of this. And I will say, coaching below platinum has made me a better coach because it's forced me to be a better teacher. Like, I feel like what below platinum does is that it forces you to be a great teacher. You don't necessarily need to be a genius about the game, but you need to be a great teacher. You need to learn how to teach. And so I think I've become a better teacher overall, and the underlying skill set of coaching through my below platinum program. So definitely interesting. I'm very excited moving forward to see what this journey is going to kind of entail. Moving on. Now, look, I want to hone in for a second on the D2 plus climb. I've been very vocal about my take on the D2 plus game, but D2 plus climb, but I want to kind of share a few things here. I think, a very simple way of viewing the D2 plus climb is that you have to solve, let's say you want to get from D2 to Grandmaster. You have to solve 1,000 puzzles. And what I mean by that is that you need to put yourself into 1,000 confusing situations. Right? And this could be, a confusing situation could be anything from, oh, I didn't know we would win this 2v2, or I didn't know we shouldn't have contested that rift, or I didn't know, oh yeah, these lane assignments were wrong, or I had the wrong win con assessment, or I didn't know what my role is in this composition for this team fight. Each of these are puzzles. And when you solve that puzzle, you get a little bit of learning. We get something from that. We get a little bit of experience. We gain a little bit of game sense. We probably work on our execution, so on and so forth. And if you do this with the mentality of like really problem solving, with intention, with curiosity, remaining open-minded, getting into the review, literally kind of following this process, you will inevitably become a higher level player. The difficulty is not really solving one puzzle. It's doing this again and again and again without getting distracted, without worrying about meta or LP or teammates, all this other crap, and actually just staying on the track and not losing your mind, as you're not getting confused by champ pools, etc., etc., etc. And, this ties into one of my favorite analogies. And so for those of you who are familiar with Ray Dalio, the famous hedge fund guy, he wrote a book called Principles. And he kind of spoke about kind of his life philosophy in terms of like how he views improving at, like how he views life in general. And the way he viewed it is that in his life, he had like kind of things that would get him better at his job, and then things that, I guess, lessons he learned in his real life that would make him a better husband or a better father or a better friend, whatever. And it was still the same process, right? So basically for him, it's like he would have a painful experience. So something went wrong. He would try to reflect on this experience, get and review it, essentially, get some sort of, learning, and therefore and then he would try to execute upon this moving forward. And by completing this cycle, he would get essentially a gem. And think about it in terms of like you're playing a video game and you kill a mob and you get like a bit of experience. For him, he viewed it as every time he completed one of these cycles and he learned something, he got a gem. And every cycle, he can hoard up these gems. And when you get to a certain amount of gems, you kind of level up and you go to the next kind of level, whether it's in life, whether in terms of being a better partner or a husband or boyfriend, or whatever, or whether it's just in tying it back to your professional life, being better at your job, getting promoted, achieving better results, or even in league, in the case of league, climbing up a division. Now, we don't know when that's going to happen. This ties into one of my other favorite metaphors, which is kind of the whole idea that when we go to the gym, and let's say we get a PT, and, we follow with the PT's advice, we get this routine, and we do this kind of routine 5 days a week, and we get this like meal plan, and we do this, we follow this diet. We know that at some point, let's say that the focus is getting six-pack abs or some shit, right? We know at some point we will get six-pack abs. It's inevitable. We just don't know when. But we know if we do this, we follow this routine, we follow these meals, we will get a six-pack. It's not really an if, it's a when. But you've got to be patient enough to understand that it will come at some point in the future without giving up or losing your mind. And same thing for the Ray Dalio. We know if we collect enough of these gems at some point in the future, we're going to be able to, hoard them all up and we're going to promote to the next level. And that's really the mentality we've got to have in Diamond 2+. It's a grind, but it takes time and we must enjoy that process. We must have fun in this, I guess, period of development. And, there is no kind of shortcuts, unfortunately. And what really speeds up that journey is Central. So I did an interview with Central on my YouTube, and he's one of my clients who went from Master to Challenger in NA. And his biggest thing was that he had to realize that he had to be selfish in the way he approached games. Not selfish in the terms of the decisions like me, but selfish in the sense that he needed to be unapologetic about the decisions he made. It's not about anyone else. You have to own your decisions, because if I own the decision, I make a decision, then no one else is completing that feedback cycle but me. Right? So again, tying back to that feedback cycle where we have there's an experience, and we make a decision and we reflect, etc. If I'm not making the decision, right? If I'm not making the decision here, someone else is making that decision for me, I can't complete this feedback cycle because I'm not the one making the decision. So until we actually start to take responsibility for our own climb and own it, and I guess, be a little bit brave and step up and be unapologetic, be open to the idea that you are going to make game losing decisions. You are going to single-handedly lose the game for your team, and own that and be okay with that. You're just not going to improve. It's just going to be hard because you're going to be complaining about teammates, and the games, to be fair, will be dictated by your teammates because you're not the one that will be fundamentally making the progress. We can only learn if you're willing to get out of your comfort zone and make those tough decisions. Moving on, I think I was wrong in the past about certain aspects of the game, right? So specifically, right, I always used to obsess over early wave states, and very specific matchup understanding. And now, look, I want to make it very clear. Okay, matchup understanding here. Look, to be very clear, this stuff is very important. You still need to know your matchups. You still need to have a rough idea about where you want waves. But I used to kind of teach it in the wrong way. For example, it's like, okay, I know that if I'm playing, so for example, Oriana into like a Fizz, I know exactly what I would want. I want to, kind of do for some sort of a 3-stack and Bullion Tower, whatever. But the reality is that you don't teach it this way. We need to start big picture first. And really what actually matters for the majority of clients is not the strategy that they use. It's more so understanding what conditions are they trying to meet and why. For example, I found it very helpful to start big picture first. For example, if I'm playing, a particular 2v2, it's very important the client knows what are they trying to achieve. Are they simply in one of those dodgeball matchups like Oriana versus Syndra where they need to, hit skill shots and dodge skill shots to play a very fast-paced lane? Are they trying to play to isolate the lane and prevent the enemy from roaming? Are they trying to win the war of attrition and slowly out-sustain them with D-Shield and second win with Akali? Are they trying to play to minimize and really keep waves conservatively and not die while they're Evelyn jungle scales? When you understand at a big picture really what you're trying to get done in a given 2v2 or 1v1, this is kind of like what we're trying to achieve. The how magically becomes a lot clearer and a lot easier. It's like, oh, no shit, I'm not going to shove the wave in this situation because I'm versing a high threat jungler and blah, 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 blah. Or no shit, I'm going to want to bully early and slow build because so on and so forth. I found it very helpful to teach at a high level and then incrementally kind of get more specific. Now, also on top of this, tying back to the wave states, right? I think that a lot of people get detached in terms of like, these concepts such as waves and resets and tempo and whatever, warding and leaning and all this stuff, right? At the end of the day, these are inherent solutions to, I guess, problems. And I guess the main problems are really, to keep it simple, I want to take good trades. And how do I want to take good trades into this specific champion? Well, if I'm playing, for example, Yone into in a mobile mage, most of the time I'm going to want the wave on my side to actually run them down the long lane and take those extended trades. So therefore, the way I play the waves is naturally an extension of trades. Or if I need to go, for example, let's say I go to in a VOD and I say, okay, here you should have reset. Well, again, that would be an extension of, if you want to take good trades and you want to dominate this guy, if you don't reset right now, your wave's going to be in a bad spot, you're going to be low, and you're not going to be able to take good trades. A lot of the time, everything comes back to, how do I take good trades in this matchup? What does taking a good trade in this matchup look like? And when you really understand the way at a high level, the way the kind of kits interact, then you can actually start to realize, okay, that's how the fundamentals would help me get this done. Rather than thinking of it in like isolation, like wave management, resets. It's like, no, we got to connect. These are just solutions to a potential problem. So it's a very, like, I guess, a little bit of a complicated thing. I maybe overcomplicated it there, but I'm trying to get across at a high level, kind of the way I'm viewing the lanes. Moving on. Another realization is that most mid-game decisions don't even need to be anywhere close to perfect, right? One of the quotes that I used to say all the time was a poor plan executed well was better than a great plan executed poorly. I've actually kind of changed my mind with this quote, right? But the quote that I say now is a plan executed well. Right? It doesn't even have to be a poor plan. Like, it doesn't have to be it doesn't matter if it's a great plan or a good plan or a bad plan. You just need a plan. Because in mid-game, what I've realized is that there's so many options of how you can win the game, right? Like you could, in any given mid-game scenario, you could go to the side, you could shove and move, you could go for some sort of a creative pick, you could start an objective, you could swap the lane assignments. I mean, the list goes on. Now, sure, objectively, I'm not here to say there isn't an optimal way to play it out. At the highest level, sure, like, we can get into that. But more often than not, just having some semblance of intention, as long as that intention is backed by some sort of an idea of like, oh, well, I want to do this because, then 9 times out of 10, like, that alone is gonna lead to success. Like just baseline having intention with some semblance of, I guess, underlying variables. You know what I mean? So, and the reason I know this for a fact is that AJ, who's actually a NA Challenger player, also an MLA coach, I've done a lot of reviews with him where I feel like he's actually fundamentally making pretty average mid-game decisions. But even though they're not optimal, because he's really decisive and owns his decisions and plays with intention, he can make up for it with good quality execution. This is where, again, execution trumps theory. Execution trumps macro. Like, if you're good at skirmishing and fighting and all this stuff, you can throw all that macro out the window. It doesn't really matter. What matters is, do you make those decisions boldly? Do those decisions have at least some semblance of intention? Do you understand roughly what you're trying to do here? And so I think that, like, I need to realize that you don't need to have amazing, perfect, optimal macro, but you do need to have intention. You do need to be good at fighting, and you do need to know what your champion wants to do and doesn't want to do, or what makes a good fight and a bad fight for your champion. Another little thing I've noticed is quite helpful is, getting people to understand what the weaknesses of their champions are before they even start the journey. Like, a lot of people say, oh, Curtis, what champ pool should I have? And should I play this champ and stuff like that? Or will I like this champion? And the reality is that, it's really personal because every champion in the game has specific weaknesses, right? For example, if I go down the Victor journey, I know that I'm very immobile, so I'm really going to have to probably work on my threat assessment. I have no mobility, so roaming is out of the question. I'm going to have to be very good at team fighting, positioning. So you know what I mean? Like, just based off the strengths and weaknesses of the champion alone, you can have a pretty good idea of what challenges that you're going to have to face based off that champion's identity and strengths and weaknesses. You know, I think a lot of people would save time in their journey by just reconciling, even just at a baseline level. Am I comfortable with the weaknesses? A sign of whether or not you're going to click with the champion is actually more so how comfortable you are with their weaknesses rather than their strengths. And that's something you guys are going to have to think about. If I'm playing Vlad, am I comfortable having dick all wave clear and not being able to roam and being trapped in lane? Yeah, cool. You might love the idea of team fighting at 30 minutes and getting some AoE flank and, you know, being really strong at 3 items. But are you okay? Are you comfortable with the idea of getting shit on in the early lane, getting pinned in lane, and not really having the ability to shove out and get prio and help your jungler? I don't know, right? I don't know. That's on you, right? That's a weakness that you're going to have to reconcile. Moving on. You know, we're all going to mentally implode throughout a season. I think it's inevitable. It doesn't matter how strong you are mentally. It doesn't matter how much experience you have. It doesn't matter how good your relationship is with the game. You know, League has a way of humbling you, no matter what. Like every year, without fail, every season, I think I've been challenger for the past, I can't even remember now, like past like 9 years or something. Every single season, every single split, I have had some sort of mental break, like not a breakdown, but like mental challenges where I felt like, fuck, is this it? Am I just capped? Can I just not improve? Or I go off the rails and I waste time and I lose my mind a little bit. And I think that we need to have a toolkit to be able to withstand this implosion. And one of the toolkits that's been really helpful for us in the Mid Lane Academy is actually the 2-week challenge, right? So essentially, let's say you feel like you derailed, you've lost the plot, you feel like your relationship with the game is poor, you're losing a lot of LP, you're not expressing your best self. You know, whenever in doubt, do a 2-week challenge. And essentially the way the 2-week challenge works is that you set a start date and an end date. And you say, okay, at this date, for the next 2 weeks, I'm going to do this challenge. And this challenge is essentially outlining how you're going to conduct yourself with your process for 2 weeks. So it might be, I am not going to look at my OPGG once. I'm going to play only these 3 champions. I'm going to review my first 3 deaths of every game. I'm going to only play 3 games a day, and I am going to take Sundays off, blah, blah. And you can even weave in out game stuff, such as I'm going to go to the gym 3 days a week. I'm going to blah, 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 right? And so the great thing about this is that you're only doing it for 2 weeks. So it doesn't feel like mentally too difficult to do for a lot of people because it's like, oh, well, it's hard, but it's only for 2 weeks. And this should be a challenge that it's difficult, but not too difficult. You need to believe that you're able to actually follow through with this. And the great thing about this is that it's the great equalizer. It kind of like calibrates or stabilizes your journey because it cuts all the crap. You're not focusing on LP anymore. You're not worried about anything else. You're just focusing on following this 2-week challenge. And more often than not, it gets people back on track. It revives their relationship with the game, and it gets them back on track. So highly recommend giving it a go if you've never tried something like this before. And my final observation here, guys, is that there's so much bullshit and so much like noise around visual ranks, and what I mean by that specifically is like, hear things like, oh my God, season 13, master is ELO inflated and platinum isn't what it used to be and you're only D4 and blah, blah, like all this shit about rank, right? And at the end of the day, cool, yeah, we all, it's important that I think we all inevitably care about rank to some degree, and I think that's cool, right? I think the rank system is amazing. It's cool to have goals and shit like that. But when we get like tied down and we get obsessed and nitpick over ranks, it's just it takes, for me, and what I've observed, it takes the joy out of the game and you become very detached from what the game is fundamentally about. You've got to remember, guys, the way the rank system works is that it's not some like random fucking pulled out of someone's ass rank system. There is a very, very clear distinction between each rank in terms of level of play and skill. Whether or not you know what that is, the reality is that it's there. there is a very clear distinction between an Emerald 4 and a P4, or an Emerald 4 and a D4, and a D4 and a Master, and a Master and a Grandmaster. Like, in terms of raw decision making, if we put a game in front of each of these players, the same game, it's going to be played out so differently from everyone. So the reality is that it doesn't matter if I'm D3 or D2 or D4 or Master. What matters is the underlying decision making and behavior and inputs and actual level of play of the game. Like, that's all that matters. That's what we're trying to do. We're actually trying to make better quality decisions. We're trying to have better quality execution. We are trying to be a more impactful player, right? And so the more you get focused on the rank and the LP, the more detached you become from the actual underlying decisions. And so for me, whenever I start to go down this rank of, oh, I've lost that amount of LP, or I was that rank, or this rank, or that player's that rank, it's just like I bring it back to, okay, what could I have done better? How could my decision making be better this game? How could I have been more impactful this game? What are the mistakes I made? How did I contribute to this game state? Just bring it back to the game, and that is what makes the game fun. What makes the game fun is that there are inherent skills that I can develop that will give me a higher, like I can outplay people and I can win a game of League of Legends. It's the skills that is fun. And yeah, I just want to kind of get that across. I feel like a lot of people just get so caught up about all this bullshit like MMR and teammates, and let's just look at your goddamn decision making, guys. You know, and that's that is the reason the rank system, it is a meritocracy, whether you guys want to believe it or not. And I know you guys are going to lose your mind over whatever excuse you guys have about whatever XYZ reasons you have about why it's not a meritocracy. It is a meritocracy, flat out. And it's a tough pill to swallow. It really is for a lot of people. And I'm not saying the system is completely perfect, but if you play enough games, you will always end up where you need to be, where you deserve to be. That is it. Flat out, no bullshit. Don't know what else to say, right? And I struggle to get that across to a lot of people, but that is the way it works. Okay, so bit of a rant towards the end there. But anyway, hopefully you can take a thing or two away from this little video. It was a bit scrappy, so I apologize for my ramblings on and my poor handwriting. I hope you guys have a lovely Christmas and New Year's. I hope you guys have achieved your ranked goals, and I hope you've got out of this year what you wanted to get out of this year. I'll be still chipping away in the Midlane Academy and Midlane School next year if you're interested. Otherwise, good luck with everything. Have a lovely holiday period, and I'll see you guys around. Cheers, guys.